Hello everybody, this is Bradley from RaceBeacon, and today in this video we're going to be taking a look at what the recent Oscar Piastri drama over the last few days has left behind over at Alpine. Now, it has not been a quiet start to this year's silly season. The day after the Hungarian Grand Prix, we get the announcement that Fernando Alonso is making a shock move to Aston Martin. Sebastian Vettel's retiring. It's all been very interesting. And then, of course, we have the legal dispute between McLaren and Alpine, but the FIA contract court has now, as we covered in yesterday's video, which was fairly well received. Thank you for 10k, by the way. But we learnt that Oscar Piastri is indeed off to McLaren, and as well there were news reports yesterday, but I didn't think this would entail a video in itself because we'll be talking a little bit about it today, that Daniel Ricciardo has been informed that he will need to move on from McLaren for the 2023 season. So at the end of this year, Daniel Ricciardo has to go somewhere else. Now, as we can see obviously from this article right here from F1 Briefings earlier today, it came out that Daniel Ricciardo has contacted Alpine only a few days ago, just after the Hungarian Grand Prix. Supposedly, this is the rough timeline here, McLaren told Daniel Ricciardo that on Sunday after the Hungarian Grand Prix that he would need to look for another team for next year. So it seems that very quickly he's moved on to contacting Alpine. And that's where the spare seat is. That's what the topic of this video is about. That spare seat at Alpine. So, if you're Alpine, what are you going to do? Now, obviously, the first and probably most obvious option is Daniel Ricciardo. He's got a history of the team, had pretty good relations with the managers while there, but obviously he did leave the team to go to McLaren for probably a little bit more money. Now, while you can argue this doesn't actually need to have much of an effect on him returning, the relations were still fairly good, at least in the media from what we saw as Daniel left, and hopefully behind closed doors, especially if Daniel's willing to get into contact about that drive, you can assume the relations are still fairly warm. So for Alpine, that could be a really decent move. Obviously though, this could come with some clause in the contract somewhere that would require Alpine to spend some money and give it to McLaren for Ricciardo, even if he had been bought out of his contract. There are some very interesting contract clauses that are rumoured to be floating around. For me, I'm not so sure on this one, but if that is the case, it could definitely be a point that Alpine will want to avoid. They do not want to give money to their direct rivals, especially when it would be seen as sort of softening the blow of having to pay out Ricciardo probably dozens of millions of dollars to get rid of his contract. So what are the other options then? Well, as we see here, reported only earlier today, according to Racing News 365, Gasly has an exit clause in his contract. This exit clause basically means that if a team is higher than AlphaTauri in the constructors' standings, Gasly is allowed to move to them. As long as they come in with an offer, Gasly is allowed to move, obviously as long as Red Bull accept it and all the like, because there's a lot of fees floating around. But basically, the exit clause is, if a team that's higher in the constructors' standings comes in for Gasly, he will be allowed to go. Now, what's quite interesting about this, obviously, is there's only two teams lower than AlphaTauri in the standings this year, and that's Williams, who do have an open seat, but I don't think anyone was expecting Gasly to end up at Williams, and Aston Martin, who now have both seats secure. So it means that there are several open seats higher up in the grid. You've of course got the likes of Haas, Alfa Romeo, and Alpine. And we know Pierre Gasly, he's a French driver. Alpine, French, state-funded. It's not bad publicity to have two French drivers in that team. Obviously, then it comes down to, is Pierre Gasly actually having a good season? And if I'm being brutally honest, no, I don't think he is. I do not think Pierre Gasly is having a great season at all. I wouldn't say it was much better than Ricciardo's season. He's got a still fairly new, not quite rookie, but still a very, very young teammate who's very inexperienced. And Yuki's sort of been at Pierre's level this year. Now, obviously, we don't know the pace of that AlphaTauri car. We don't know that raw pace, because for me, I think you've got two underperforming drivers in that car. So it's quite hard to tell. But, you know, there's definitely the offer of faster cars on the table. And Gasly to Alpine isn't the strangest option for me. It'll be really interesting to see what happens. Guys, let me know what you think is going to happen. Like I say again, thank you so much for helping us hit 10k if you've been subscribed. If you're not already, the next goal now is on to 25. So if you want to help towards that cause, get all the latest news in this twisting and turning silly season for the 2022 season, then don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and of course, let me know who you think Alpine are going to sign as their second driver alongside Esteban Ocon for next year. Really interested to hear your thoughts, and probably tomorrow we'll be going over some of them in the video. It was great to see so many comments yesterday. I think I liked / replied to over about 500, which is just absolutely crazy. So thank you so much for the support on that. Like I say, thank you for 10k as well. But guys, as ever, until next time, goodbye.